I always thought my life would be ordinary. My world was meant to be filled with the clinking of cutlery, the smell of polished wood, and the endless parade of faces that came and went through the restaurant's doors. I was 23, a simple waiter in one of the city's most expensive dining halls, a place where men in suits hid their sins behind expensive wine, and women draped in jewels laughed as though nothing in the world could touch them. To me it was survival. A way to pay rent, keep my younger brother in school, and send something back to my mother so she wouldn't have to break her back cleaning other people's houses. The pay wasn't glamorous and neither was the work. My feet ached most nights, my hands carried invisible burns from hot plates, and my pride, well, I'd left that at the door the first day I stepped into this world where I didn't belong. But I had a soft heart, one that still smiled at strangers and one that made me linger longer when old couples came in, helping them with their chairs, or when children dropped napkins and looked up at me with embarrassed eyes. The managers often scolded me for being too human. They wanted efficiency. Quick service, no attachments. But I couldn't turn that part of me off. It was a Tuesday evening when I first saw him. I remember because Tuesdays were usually quiet, reserved for businessmen and foreign diplomats who liked discretion. But that night, there was a hum in the air, a ripple of tension that even the staff could feel. Word spread quickly, he's coming. At first, I thought it was just another politician or maybe a wealthy oil magnate. The kind of men who believed money made them gods. But when he walked in, I realized this was something different. The Mafia prince. The sheikh. He wasn't announced. He didn't need to be. He arrived with two men flanking him, their eyes sharp, scanning the room like predators. The restaurant seemed to bend around him. Even the chandeliers seemed to shine brighter, as if desperate to please him. He was tall, dressed in a dark tailored suit that whispered money but carried danger in its seams. His hair was slicked back, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and his presence, his presence, was overwhelming. He didn't just walk, he owned every step, like the floor itself was honored to feel his weight. I froze with a tray in my hands. My manager nudged me sharply, reminding me to breathe, to move, to keep working. But my eyes betrayed me, darting back to him every chance they got. I had heard whispers about him before, how he was the heir to an empire of shadows, half sheikh, half outlaw, ruling the underworld with both elegance and blood. They called him ruthless, untouchable, a man who could silence enemies with a look. Yet as he sat down at his private table near the back, surrounded by an air of command that made even the most arrogant men in the room shrink, I saw something else too. There was a calmness in his movements, a patience in the way he placed his napkin, a kind of elegance that didn't belong to a man carved from violence. I told myself to stop staring. I was a waiter, invisible, a servant in his world. People like me didn't cross paths with people like him, not unless fate was feeling cruel. But when I carried the first glass of water to his table, his eyes lifted. Dark, piercing. They pinned me where I stood, so sharp and unrelenting that I nearly spilled the drink. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. It was as though his gaze stripped me bare, peeling away the uniform, the polite words, and seeing straight into the trembling boy beneath. My throat tightened. My hands shook. For a heartbeat, the restaurant disappeared. It was just him and me, and the weight of that look pressed into me so deeply I thought I'd suffocate. I managed a quiet, "Your water, sir," though my voice was softer than I intended. He accepted it with a nod. No words. But there was a flicker there, a momentary spark as though he was memorizing me too. And then he looked away, turning back to his companions, leaving me to stumble back toward the kitchen with my heart slamming against my ribs. All night, I felt his presence like a shadow on my skin. Every time I passed his table, I could sense him, even if he didn't glance my way again. Something about him unsettled me, drew me in, left me restless long after his dinner ended and he walked out into the night, disappearing into the fleet of black cars waiting for him. I told myself it was nothing. Just fascination, just fear, just the thrill of seeing a man who lived on the edge of life and death. But deep inside I knew better. That look, that presence had left a mark on me. And no matter how much I tried to shake it off, something told me my life had just changed. Because when a prince of shadows looks your way, you don't get to walk away untouched. The second time he came, I prayed he wouldn't notice me. The first encounter had already left me shaken for days. I couldn't sleep without replaying the way his eyes cut into me, as if he had written my fate with a single glance. I told myself I was being foolish. He was a customer, dangerous, untouchable, someone whose life existed galaxies away from mine. I was just a waiter. Nothing more. But when he entered again, the room shifted exactly the same way it had the first time. Conversation lowered to whispers, laughter died on tongues, and every staff member stiffened like soldiers awaiting inspection. The Mafia prince, the sheikh, was not a man people ignored. "Keep your eyes down," Marco, one of the older waiters, muttered to me as we lined up our trays. "Don't linger. Don't engage. Serve and leave. Men like him, they eat you alive if you make a mistake." I nodded, trying to steady my breath, but luck had already decided to betray me. His eyes swept the room, and when they landed on me, recognition flickered across his face. Just for a heartbeat. And then he gave the smallest gesture, subtle but unmistakable. He wanted me. Me specifically, to serve his table. My manager's eyes lit up, probably imagining the tips or worse the prestige, and shoved me forward. "Go. Don't disappoint him." I felt like I was walking into fire. As I approached his table, I could hear the hushed whispers behind me. "That's the sheikh's son, the one who runs the ports. They say he never forgives betrayal. He once made a man disappear for spilling wine on him." The rumors were endless, painting him as a monster in an expensive suit. By the time I reached his table, my palms were slick with sweat. I set the tray down carefully, determined not to tremble. And then once again he looked at me. It wasn't a casual glance. It was a tether. Dark eyes locking onto mine with a weight I could hardly bear. Forbidden. Dangerous. The kind of eye contact that spoke without words, that warned me I was standing too close to something I could never fully escape. "Good evening," he said at last, his voice low, deep, carrying the kind of command that silenced rooms. But what startled me most wasn't the power, it was the softness hidden beneath it. He spoke to me kindly. Gently, almost. As if he knew I was trembling inside and wanted to ease it, though he'd never admit it. "Good evening, sir," I managed, bowing slightly as the words stumbled out of me. "Water," he requested, simple, polite. "And bring me the menu." I hurried to fetch them, grateful for the chance to breathe again. When I returned, one of his companions, loud, arrogant, snatched the menu from my hands with a scoff. "Do you even know how to serve properly, boy?" he muttered under his breath. My cheeks flushed, shame rising hot in my chest. Before I could apologize, the prince spoke. His voice cut through the man's arrogance like steel. "Enough." He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. Just one word, sharp and final. The man stiffened and went silent, eyes dropping instantly. My heart stuttered. He had defended me. I placed the rest of the menus carefully, murmuring my thanks under my breath. I wasn't sure if he heard, but his gaze softened, barely, almost imperceptibly, before shifting back to his wine glass. The night continued in a blur. I served them drinks, carried plates, poured wine. Each time I approached, I felt the heat of his attention, though he rarely spoke. Yet there was one moment I would never forget. I was clearing the table when one of the other men gestured wildly, accidentally knocking over his wine glass. It tipped toward the prince, and for one terrifying second I imagined red wine spilling across his perfect suit, imagined the wrath, the humiliation, the whispered stories of violence turning into reality right before me. But my hand shot out, catching the glass just before it toppled. The liquid sloshed dangerously close to the edge but didn't spill. My chest heaved, my pulse thundering in my ears as I straightened it back on the table. The whole group froze. Even his guards blinked in surprise. And then, he looked at me again. This time there was no coldness, no intimidation. Just something unreadable, like curiosity wrapped in silence. His lips twitched the faintest bit, not quite a smile but enough to steal the breath from my lungs. He inclined his head toward me, the smallest acknowledgement. Gratitude maybe. Or respect. Whatever it was, it planted something inside me. A dangerous seed. Because in that moment, I realized he wasn't just the untouchable prince everyone whispered about. He was also a man who saw me, who had chosen to look at me when he could have looked at anyone else. When they finally left, I stood by the entrance, tray clutched tight in my hands, watching the black cars whisk him away. My heart ached in ways I didn't understand. It was foolish, reckless, maybe even suicidal to feel anything for him. But the truth was undeniable. Something had begun that night. Something forbidden, fragile, and irresistible. And deep inside I knew I was already his. After that night everything changed. At first I thought it was coincidence. Maybe the prince had business in the city that required him to dine here often. But as the weeks passed, his visits became too frequent, too deliberate. And every single time without fail he asked for me. The staff began to notice. They whispered when they thought I wasn't listening, sneaking glances as I walked past with a tray. Some envied me for catching his attention. Others pitied me, convinced I was on borrowed time. Because in their eyes, being noticed by him was dangerous, like standing too close to fire. You might feel the warmth, but eventually you'd get burned. Yet despite the warnings, I couldn't resist. Each visit was different, though small in its progress. At first, it was simple things. The way he'd let his gaze linger when I set down his drink, or how he'd murmur "thank you" in that deep, controlled voice of his. Then, slowly, the wall shifted. He began speaking to me, short sentences at first, questions that seemed ordinary but held weight in his tone. "What's your name?" he asked one evening as casually as if it didn't matter. But I knew it did. "Ian," I answered, my voice steady though inside my heart raced. He repeated it once as though testing the shape of it on his tongue. "Ian." And for reasons I couldn't explain, hearing my name in his voice sent a shiver through me. Over time, our conversations grew. Nothing too obvious, nothing that would draw attention. But between the orders and polite exchanges, he'd slip in comments that made my chest tighten. "You look tired tonight. Do they work you too hard here? You don't smile as much when you're distracted. What weighs on you? Do you enjoy this city, or do you dream of leaving it?" I should have kept my answers guarded. But something about him disarmed me. Maybe it was the loneliness I caught in his eyes when no one else was looking. Maybe it was the strange safety I felt when he was near, despite everything I knew of his world. Whatever it was, I found myself talking more than I ever intended. One evening, when he noticed me rubbing my sore wrist after carrying too many plates, he said something that startled me. "You shouldn't break yourself for work that doesn't care about you," he murmured, his gaze locked on mine. "People like you deserve more." I laughed softly, trying to defuse the intensity. "And what exactly do I deserve, sir?" His lips curved just barely. "Maybe I'll show you one day." That night I couldn't sleep. His words played on repeat in my mind, carrying both promise and peril. I knew it was dangerous to feel this pull toward him, to let myself be drawn into the gravity of his orbit. He was a Mafia prince, after all, a man surrounded by shadows and blood. I was just a waiter, fragile and ordinary. But the heart doesn't care for reason. And mine beat faster every time I saw him. It wasn't just the intensity either. Somewhere between the silence and the shadows we found light. A kind of quiet understanding that slipped through in subtle ways. An inside joke about a customer's ridiculous order. A smile hidden behind his wine glass. The rare moment his laughter cracked the mask he wore so well, low and warm, like a secret only I was allowed to hear. Then came the gift. It was small, discreet. A folded napkin left behind on the table after one of his dinners, one corner weighted with a sleek silver tie clip. When I picked it up, my first instinct was panic. My manager would kill me if he thought I had stolen from the prince. But when I turned it over, I found a tiny engraving on the inside, a falcon, his family's crest. And beneath it, written faintly in pen on the napkin, just one word: "Yours." My breath caught. I shoved it quickly into my pocket before anyone noticed, my hands trembling. That night, lying awake in my small apartment, I traced the emblem again and again with my thumb, wondering if it was real or if I had imagined it all. It was real. And it was a message. A week later it happened. Our first meeting outside the restaurant. It was near closing time when the manager told me someone was waiting for me by the back door. My stomach twisted with nerves as I stepped into the cool night air, and there he was, leaning casually against a black car, no guards in sight. Just him. For a moment I froze. My instincts screamed at me to run, to keep this line uncrossed. But then he spoke. "Relax, Ian. I won't bite." I managed a shaky laugh. "That's not what the rumors say." His lips curved slightly. "Rumors keep people in line. But they don't tell the whole story." We stood in silence for a moment, the city noise humming faintly around us. He studied me, his gaze softer than I had ever seen it. And then he said something that broke me open. "Do you know how exhausting it is," he asked quietly, "to be surrounded by people and still feel utterly alone?" I swallowed hard, words caught in my throat. Because I knew. I knew exactly what he meant, though our worlds were so different. Loneliness doesn't care about wealth or power. It lives in the cracks of every life. Without thinking I answered, "Yes. I know." He exhaled slowly as if my admission had eased some invisible weight. In that moment the distance between us narrowed. I could feel it, the dangerous, undeniable pull. The air thickened, charged with something neither of us dared name. My heart pounded as he reached into his pocket and handed me something small. A prayer bead bracelet, simple and dark, worn smooth as if it had been held many times. "For you," he said softly. "Keep it. It will remind you, you're not invisible." I stared at it in my palm, overwhelmed. No one had ever given me something that felt so personal, so significant. When I looked up, our eyes met, and for a fleeting second the world around us disappeared. It was reckless, dangerous, impossible. But in that moment I wasn't just a waiter and he wasn't just a mafia prince. We were two lonely souls colliding in the dark. And I knew whatever this was, wherever it was heading, I was already too deep to turn back. The deeper I was drawn into his world, the more I realized how fragile my safety really was. For weeks, I tried to pretend it was only about stolen glances, hidden words, and gifts slipped discreetly into my hand. But nothing that belonged to him stayed secret for long. The mafia world had eyes everywhere. And eventually those eyes turned on me. It started with whispers in the kitchen. "You've noticed, haven't you?" Marco muttered one night while polishing glasses. "The sheikh's son, he favors you. Always you. That's not good." I forced a laugh, hoping to brush it off. "He just likes consistency." Marco shook his head gravely. "No, it's more. And trust me, Ian, men like him don't let anyone near unless there's a reason. Don't be foolish. You'll get caught in something you can't survive." I wanted to argue to tell him he was wrong. But the looks from the other staff silenced me. They had already drawn their conclusions. To them, I was no longer just a waiter, I was a pawn in something bigger, and everyone knew pawns rarely survived. Still, I couldn't stay away. Not when he kept looking at me like I mattered, not when he kept showing me fragments of the man beneath the title. One evening, as I carried a tray past the private lounge, I overheard something that made my blood run cold. "Weakness," a man hissed. His voice was sharp, dripping with contempt. "The prince thinks himself untouchable, but even lions can bleed. I heard he has a fondness for someone lowly. A waiter." My breath caught. "If that's true," another voice sneered, "then we have leverage. Find the boy. Use him. If the prince cares, he'll bend. If not, well, accidents happen in this city." I nearly dropped the tray. My pulse roared in my ears as I stumbled away, heart pounding. They were talking about me. They knew. That night, I found him waiting near the back of the restaurant, just as he had before. My hands shook as I approached. "They know," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Your rivals. They know about me." His eyes darkened instantly. He stepped closer, his presence a shield and a storm all at once. "You shouldn't have heard that. They said they'll use me against you. That I'm your weakness." He cursed under his breath, something I'd never heard him do before. Then he cupped the back of his neck as though trying to steady himself. "Ian, this is exactly why I warned myself not to let you close." "Then why did you?" I shot back, anger rising with fear. "Why keep coming here? Why keep pulling me into your orbit if it's only going to destroy me?" His gaze snapped to mine, fierce, almost desperate. "Because I couldn't help it." The silence between us burned. He took a step closer and then another until his voice was barely above a whisper. "Being near me is dangerous. Every enemy I have will see you as a target. I should push you away. I should let you go." His jaw tightened. "But when I look at you, I don't want to." Something inside me broke then, splintering into raw honesty. My voice trembled as I confessed, "And when you look at me, I feel seen. For the first time in my life. I don't care about danger. I care about you." The weight of those words hung in the night air. And then it happened. He kissed me. It wasn't careful. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate, raw, full of all the tension we had been drowning in for weeks. His hand gripped the side of my neck, pulling me closer, while my fingers clutched at his suit as if he might vanish if I let go. The world disappeared, the restaurant, the whispers, the threats. All that existed was the heat of his mouth against mine, the taste of danger and longing colliding in a secret we could never undo. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine, his breath unsteady. "You don't know what you've just done," he whispered. "Yes, I do," I answered, my voice shaking. "I've chosen you." For a moment I thought maybe we could survive it. That maybe we could keep hiding in the shadows, keep finding ways to exist in stolen moments. But I was naive. Because only days later they came for me. It happened after a late shift. I was walking home, the streets unusually quiet, when a van screeched to a halt beside me. Before I could react, two men in masks grabbed me, yanking me inside. A rag forced over my mouth stole my screams, and the world tilted into darkness. When I woke, I was tied to a chair in a dim, abandoned warehouse. My head throbbed, my wrists burned from the rope. Shadows moved around me, men with hard eyes and cruel smiles. Well, one of them sneered. "So this is the precious waiter." I tried to steady my breath, though fear clawed at my chest. "You won't get away with this," I said, my voice hoarse. He laughed. "That's the idea, boy. You see, your prince thinks he's untouchable. But what happens when his little toy is dangling over the fire? Will he kneel? Will he bleed? Or will he watch you disappear? Another man leaned close, his breath hot against my ear. We could end you now, you know. But where's the fun in that? Better to let him watch you suffer. Better to make him choose. My stomach twisted. They weren't just threatening me, they were using me as bait. Hours blurred together, filled with taunts and threats. Fear pressed down on me like a weight, yet beneath it all, one thought held me together. He would come. He had to. Because in that kiss, in his words, I had seen something real. And if he felt even half of what I did, he wouldn't let them take me. But as the night dragged on, doubt crept in. What if I was wrong? What if I was nothing more than a distraction, easily sacrificed in a world built on power and survival? What if this was how my story ended, forgotten in some nameless warehouse, just another casualty in his bloody empire? And then, somewhere in the distance, I heard it. The sharp crack of gunfire. Shouts. The unmistakable sound of war breaking through the night. My heart leapt. He was coming. The gunfire grew louder, closer, until the warehouse doors slammed open with a thunder that shook the floor. Shouts erupted. The men guarding me spun toward the entrance, weapons raised, but it was already too late. He was there, my prince, moving like a storm in human form. I had seen him composed, elegant, untouchable in the restaurant. But here, in the chaos, he was something else entirely. His suit was gone, replaced by black tactical clothes, his eyes blazing with fury. The men who had laughed at me only moments ago crumbled under his rage. Shots cracked, bodies dropped, and the air filled with the acrid sting of smoke and fear. For the first time, I witnessed the man the world whispered about. Ruthless, precise, deadly. Yet even in the whirlwind of violence, his eyes searched, scanning desperately until they found me tied to the chair. Ian. Hearing my name from his lips, raw and urgent, broke something inside me. Relief, terror, and something far deeper crashed together until I could barely breathe. One of the kidnappers lunged toward me, knife in hand, but the prince was faster. He crossed the distance in seconds, his fist colliding with the man's jaw so hard I heard the sickening crack of bone. The knife clattered to the ground. The prince's gun followed, pressed cold and unyielding to the man's forehead. Touch him again, he growled, voice low and lethal, and you won't live to regret it. The man froze, eyes wide with terror. I had never seen anyone so quickly reduced to nothing. And then, as swiftly as the fury had come, he turned to me and the storm softened. His hands, which had dealt death seconds before, trembled as they reached for the ropes binding my wrists. You're safe now, he murmured, his voice breaking, so unlike the man who had terrified an entire room. I've got you. The ropes fell away and I collapsed forward into his arms. I couldn't hold myself up, couldn't stop the sob that ripped through me. He caught me easily, pulling me tight against him. For a moment, the rest of the world disappeared. I thought, my voice cracked, barely a whisper. I thought you wouldn't come. His grip tightened. I would burn this entire city to the ground before I let them take you from me. The chaos around us faded as his men secured the warehouse, dragging away the kidnappers. All I could hear was his heartbeat, steady and strong against my ear, grounding me. When he finally pulled back, his face was inches from mine, his expression raw, stripped of the mask he usually wore. You don't understand, he said, voice low and trembling. I've never let anyone close. Not truly. Not in this life. Power is lonely, Ian. Trust is dangerous. And yet, with you, he broke off, shaking his head as though the words themselves were impossible. You've undone me. My chest tightened painfully. The man who commanded armies, who made enemies tremble, was looking at me as though I held his entire world in my hands. I'm no one, I whispered, tears burning my eyes. Just a waiter. I have nothing, no power, no protection. All I have is my heart and it's yours. Even if it kills me. His jaw clenched and for a terrifying second I thought he would pull away. But then his hand cradled my cheek, gentle despite the blood still on his knuckles. Don't say that, he whispered fiercely. You're not no one. You're the only one. Do you hear me? The only person I trust, the only person He swallowed hard as though the next words cost him everything. The only person I love. The world stopped. I stared at him breathless, my heart threatening to burst. Love. He had said love. I didn't think a man like him was even capable of it, but the truth was there, blazing in his eyes, undeniable. I love you too, I said, my voice breaking but steady enough to carry the weight of it. I don't care about the danger. I don't care about the whispers. I can't walk away from you. For a moment, silence stretched between us, thick with everything we had confessed. Then he kissed me again. Not desperate like before, but slow, reverent, as though sealing a vow between us. His lips tasted of smoke and salt, of violence and tenderness bound together in a contradiction that was uniquely him. When we finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. "Then promise me," he whispered, his breath warm against my skin. "Promise me you'll stand by me no matter what comes." I nodded, tears slipping down my cheeks. "Only if you promise me the same." His hand tightened around mine, his voice steady. "Always." In that ruined warehouse, surrounded by shadows and blood, we made our promise. Two souls from different worlds, bound together not by safety or reason, but by something far stronger. And for the first time I wasn't afraid. Months passed, and with them, the sharp edges of my old life seemed to blur into something unrecognizable. I was no longer just the nervous waiter polishing glasses and sneaking glances at a mysterious customer. No, the moment the prince stormed that warehouse, everything changed. His world became mine. It wasn't an easy transition. The Mafia's shadows crept into everything, every whispered conversation, every suspicious glance, every night interrupted by the sound of engines idling too close to the house. The danger was real, but so was the strange kind of belonging I felt beside him. People looked at me differently now. The staff who once called me too close to the prince, now lowered their voices when I walked by. The rivals who had thought me easy prey learned that touching me meant invoking his wrath. And yet, despite the walls of fear and respect that closed around me, I tried to hold on to the parts of myself that mattered. The kindness, the small joys, the simple humanity that had caught his eye in the first place. At first, I worried I would lose myself in his empire. But instead, something unexpected happened. He softened. The prince who once carried himself with ice in his veins began to melt, slowly, carefully, only in moments when we were alone. He still ruled his empire with an iron hand, but in the quiet spaces between the chaos, I saw the man underneath. The man who would watch me cook breakfast with amused curiosity, who would slip his hand into mine under the table, who would fall asleep only once he knew I was safely at his side. "You keep me human," he whispered one night as we lay tangled together, exhaustion pulling at his voice. "Without you, I'd have drowned in this life a long time ago." And he kept me brave. I learned to carry myself differently. Not as a fighter, not as a mafia heir, but as someone who mattered in his world. I spoke up where I would have once stayed quiet, stood tall even when fear gnawed at my stomach. I wasn't his shadow anymore, I was his anchor. We balanced each other, power and humility weaving into something stronger than either alone. Still, it was a dangerous love. We didn't parade it in front of others. His enemies were always watching, always waiting for a weakness. Our bond had to remain ours alone, hidden beneath the layers of politics and bloodshed. But in that secrecy, it grew, thriving in the stolen glances and unspoken promises. We dreamed, sometimes, of a different life. "Imagine," he said one night, his voice low as we sat on the balcony of his penthouse, the city glittering below us. "Just a house by the sea. No guards. No wars. Just you and me." I closed my eyes and let the image take shape. Salt in the air. Sand under our feet. A world where he wasn't the prince and I wasn't the waiter who stumbled into his orbit. Just two men who found each other. "I'd cook," I whispered. "Every morning. And you'd finally rest." He smiled, and for once it wasn't the sharp, controlled smile he showed the world. It was soft. Real. We both knew it was a dream. The Mafia wasn't a world one simply walked away from. But still, that vision of peace became our secret prayer, our shared hope for someday. And then one evening he made it real, if only for a night. He didn't tell me where we were going. His car drove us out of the city, away from the noise and neon, into the quiet hum of countryside roads. We stopped at a cliffside villa overlooking the sea, the sun sinking low on the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of fire and gold. The guards disappeared into the distance. For the first time in months it was just us. Dinner waited on a small table set on the terrace, candles flickering in the sea breeze. The sound of waves crashing below filled the silence, soothing, eternal. He pulled out my chair like a gentleman, though I teased him for it, and we sat across from each other, the world stripped down to its simplest truth. Him and me. As we ate, he spoke less like the Mafia prince and more like a man rediscovering himself. He laughed freely, softer than usual, and every now and then his gaze would linger on me, as though memorizing my face under the twilight. When the plates were cleared, we stayed there, side by side, watching the stars emerge one by one. His arm came around my shoulders, pulling me into him, and I leaned against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. It was in that silence, that perfect quiet, that I understood. I had entered his life as no one, a waiter serving wine and dishes to strangers. I had no power, no legacy, no place in his world. And yet, somehow, I had become the only thing he allowed himself to love, the only piece of peace he carried into the battlefield of his empire. I tilted my head up to look at him, and he met my gaze with that same softness I had seen only in private. "I was just a waiter," I whispered, the words carrying more truth than I ever expected. "But I became the heart of a prince." His hand cupped my face, his thumb brushing lightly across my cheek. "No," he said quietly, firmly. "You became my heart." Our lips met again under the blanket of stars, not hurried, not desperate, just a kiss that spoke of everything we had endured and everything we hoped for. It was a promise, not of safety or certainty, but of love that would endure whatever storms came next. For once, there were no shadows, no enemies lurking, no weight of titles between us. Just him and me, the sea and the sky, and the fragile, beautiful hope that maybe, just maybe, love was enough to light even the darkest world. And I believed it. I still do.